Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Lonely Liberal Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Zankin, and I'm so happy to have you on this lovely Wednesday show. I mean, my God, do we have a good one for you. We're going to be talking about what has the Iran war actually achieved for the U.S. Specifically, the U.S. has had all these stated goals, right? Destroying their nuclear capabilities, a regime change, and all that. So we're going to go through all the goals that they said they wanted to achieve with this war. And have they done it? Like what the progress has been, what it's not been, and where we think things are going. I mean, my God, things keep changing all the time with this stuff. So it's good to get a recap and kind of figure out what the heck's going on. But before we do, and I'm actually really excited to talk about this, but even more excited to say, I don't know if you've noticed, if you have on YouTube, you might have noticed on the thumbnail, but this is episode 100. And I'm not going to go woo too loud and celebrate, but trust me when I say this, internally, I am so stoked. I am so happy. My God. I mean, when I started the show like a year ago, I would have never thought we would have gone 100 episodes at all. But my God, you guys are so cool, so nice. I feel like the people who listen to the show are awesome. I feel like I know you guys are so awesome. And I'm so appreciative of all the lovely things you all say and listening and sharing it and all that stuff. But if you're new to the show, hello, or just newish, it is worth stating that there are now 100 shows in our backlog, and many of them are fairly evergreen, especially these Wednesday shows. Not that our shows with Rick on Sunday aren't, but like those are more news focused. Those are just kind of random deep dives into things. So I encourage you to look through, go through all the different episodes, see if anything you find interesting. But more than anything, I just want to say thank you so much. I know I'm very grateful. Rick's very grateful. And yeah, we wouldn't be here if you guys weren't there. So again, thank you, thank you. So let's get into this more depressing, but maybe more interesting stuff. And that is, what the heck has this war even achieved? All right. So when the U.S. and Israel launched what they call Operation Epic Fury, which, by the way, Jon Stewart made this comment on The Daily Show, but who the hell is naming these things? I mean, I thought Elon was out of the government. They had 4 stated goals, okay? And these goals were the following: destroy Iran's missile capabilities, destroy Iran's navy, prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and stop Iran from funding and directing its proxies, so like Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, stuff like that. A regime change was technically not an official goal. I mean, you had Hegseth say, oh, we're not doing that, but Trump made it abundantly clear that that's what they want. Remember, he tweeted out or truthed out or whatever. He told the Iranian people to seize their destiny. This is your chance, blah, blah, blah. Actually, I think he said that in the official announcement too. So, yeah, I mean, come on. What does that mean? That's regime change. So the goal of this whole thing were those things, right? So it's 4 plus 1. And I want to go through all of them so we can kind of have a feel for if not only is the U.S. achieving what it said, but is this been a huge bust, right? And so let's get through the first few, the missiles and the Navy. And the Navy is probably the one that they've achieved the most of. I'd give it a partial score, right? Because they really have destroyed several Iranian warships all around with the Gulf of Oman, which is the water, right? But I think what's interesting to think about here with the Navy is that Iran's Navy really wasn't a part of its main military strategy anymore, and it hasn't been for a bit. The way they operate around the Strait of Hormuz, which is the area where all the oil and gas goes through and stuff like that, they use deterrence, not firepower. What does that mean? It means that they use drones to like sea land mines or sea mines, I guess you'd say, things like that. It's all about freaking people out about not bringing the boats through like missiles or drones and things like that. Not really like a Navy force. So that's how they've been operating it, and that's kind of where their Navy might, quote unquote, would be. And you can see by the proof that this is true, because usually there are 150 plus vessels that go through this all the time. There's basically been none going through. In fact, Iran is only allowing Chinese vessels through the Strait of Hormuz right now. And so you could argue this is a big gift to Beijing, right? Okay, so that's the Navy front. On the missile front, they're still firing. They are not doing what they normally do, but they haven't lost the capability, right? Usually what they would do is just shoot basically these massive salvos all over, and it makes mainly focused at Israel, but this time, and you may have heard this on the news, they've been focusing on this kind of wider target, right? They've hit the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, Cyprus, Saudi Arabia. They're actually hitting more countries, you could say, not fewer. So the idea that this has like ended their missile capability is just wrong. I mean, they're literally shooting them as we speak. Now, Goal 3, which is the destruction or deterrence of the nuclear program, is the biggest mistake of them all from the US's point of view. This has been such a floundered thing. It's not even crazy, and I want to just explain why. So, again, just for some backstory, right? Last year in June, the US launched what they called Operation Midnight Hammer. You guys probably remember it from the news, where they dropped all those bunker busters on all these Iranian nuclear sites. Y'all remember Trump said, oh my God, we've completely destroyed the nuclear program. It's gone, blah, blah, blah. But what has been ultimately reported since then, right, is that Iran had moved its enriched uranium all over the place, and they knew the strikes were kind of coming, right? And in fact, in February, the IAEA found all these hidden enriched uranium in undamaged facilities, right? So this is literally why this started, right? The first bombs didn't work, even though Trump, beat his chest and said they did. We knew this, right? But here's the question. So they've done these bombs now in this new wave, and they've killed the Iranian supreme leader, right, Khomeini. What actually happened, right? And this is something I mentioned on the show on Sunday, but I think it's really worth unpacking. Iran has gone from a state with what you'd call nuclear latency to a state that is called nuclear grievance. And this is the London School of Economics language. I didn't make those words up. But what does that mean? So before the war, right, this war, the way Iran used its nuclear program was a bargaining chip, okay? Specifically to relieve them, like sanctions that were placed on the country. So what are sanctions? Basically economic restrictions about what can go in and out of the country from a money point of view. So what Iran was basically doing was saying, look, we have this burgeoning nuclear program, take off the sanctions and we'll behave ourselves, right? That's basically the incentive for why Iran had its nuclear weapons. Now, it is also true that the previous supreme leader had a lot of aggressive, rhetoric specifically at Israel, but in effect, what they've actually were doing with their nuclear program was it's using it as a bargaining chip for economic sanctions, okay? But now that during negotiations, the U.S. started bombing and then ultimately killed their leader, nuclear weapons aren't a bargaining chip anymore. They're now seen as a survival requirement, right? And if you think about it, what other country talks like that? It's North Korea, right? And literally, Kim Jong-un this last week has been using these strikes on Iran as propaganda to say, like, this is why we do what we do. This is why we have our nuclear bombs. We don't want to get taken out by these guys. And this is how they operate. So, like, literally, we may have just handed any regime on earth the best argument for going nuclear. I mean, they'll literally just say, look what happened to Iran when they didn't have the bomb. And in fact, they mean, why would we even negotiate about the bomb when they'll bomb you during negotiations? You know what I mean? So what I worry about and what I think is shocking that it's not on the news more is that one of the biggest long-term consequences of this whole thing is going to be how different regimes in the future handle nuclear weapons in terms of transparency, but in fact, or in terms of conversations. I feel like they're going to now be highly motivated to go the North Korea route rather than what Iran had been doing, right? And that is no good. Goal 4, which is stop Iran's proxies, right? How's that going, right? So they wanted to stop Iran from funding, arming, and directing its proxy groups. For those who don't know, that is Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthis in Yemen. Let's go one by one, right? So Hezbollah is back at war, right? And it's worse than it's been in a long time. So they've had a ceasefire in place since November of 2024 when Israel invaded them in 2024. It's really important to know that Israel has been violating this ceasefire, right? They had been launching basically daily strikes into Lebanon for the last year and a half. And so Hezbollah then has re-entered the fight, quote unquote, after Khamenei was killed. And now, this is really interesting. Lebanon has now officially launched more attacks on Israel than Iran ever has, or at least recently. And Israel has now authorized a ground invasion of Lebanon. Nearly 700,000 Lebanese people have been displaced. This is a legit active war right now that's getting basically no coverage, okay? Israel has a ground invasion on Lebanon. 700,000 people have been displaced, and Lebanon has launched more attacks on Israel than Iran had. Okay, this is the state of affairs in Lebanon-Israel relations, and a war that is happening literally on the ground. The Houthis, right? So the ones in Yemen, they have been quiet, right? But it is important to remember that when the Trump administration took place, the Houthis were the original target of their first kind of attacks. Remember the leaked war plans that Hegseth, the Department of Defense Secretary, leaked with the Atlantic editor? Those were about, strikes on the Houthis, right, in Yemen. And they did stop right after the ceasefire in October 2025. But what they've said right now has been like we are in solidarity, but they haven't done anything. But a lot of analysts say that they're waiting for the right moment. I would not be shocked at all if they re-enter, but that would be a disaster. That would be drama in the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and then on top of that, with the Strait of Hormuz stuff that we're going to go to in a little bit, my God, stress. And so the last one is Hamas, right? And obviously Hamas, of notoriety from the terrorist attacks that they did on Israel and the terrorist group that is contained within where Palestine is and stuff like that. It's a very complicated stuff. But what we're talking about today is they are there still. They are not gone. They are still armed. And I think they're less defeated than you would think they would be given the mass destruction that has happened in Gaza. So the bottom line on proxies are Hezbollah is literally fighting Israel. The Houthis are on the sideline for now, and Hamas is alive but not doing stuff. Okay? The goal was for Iran to stop directing them, but really what's happened is actually now they're more engaged. At least Hezbollah is. So did it neutralize the proxy network? Meh, no. And then lastly, for the goal, the kind of unofficial goal, which is the regime change goal, right? How's that going, right? So as I said it off the top of the show, their supreme leader, Khamenei, he was killed in the initial strikes. So the U.S. apparently achieved something it said it wasn't a goal. Iran immediately named Mujtaba Khamenei, the old leader's son, as the new supreme leader. Trump doesn't like him. And that's exactly why Iran chose him, right? I mean, they chose him because they didn't like him, right? The enemy rejected them. It was honestly, like a rebuke in itself. And what's unfortunate about this is that this Khomeini, the son Khomeini, is seen as potentially even more radical than the old guy. And if we also factor in the fact that the U.S. literally just killed this kid's dad, mom, wife, and kid, I can't imagine he's in a great mood and he's going to, secede to this unconditional surrender stuff that Trump wants. I mean, my God, it seems worse. So, in a way, he wanted this Venezuela thing. They took the guy out and then the new regime likes him. But instead, we got a regime change and now we have a harder, more conservative lined regime in practice. So that went bad. That didn't do what he thought it would do, and that's not good. So that was a total fail, in my opinion. And so I want to recap all of this, right? So that's a lot to take in, but it's kind of going goal by goal. So let's do the real scorecard in a way. Not what we set out to do, but what has actually happened. And let's look at home, right, on the U.S. side, right? Since this war has begun, gas prices are up 17%. Oil went from under $70 a barrel on February 27th to a peak of nearly $120 a barrel, now sitting around 90, but still. Diesel's around $5. Gas is $4+ nationally if this continues for a few more weeks. And 30% of global fertilizer exports go through the Strait, which affects food prices, right? So all of our prices are tempoing to increase or have already increased. We've now installed not we, but now there's a new, more conservative supreme leader in Iran, chosen specifically to defy Washington. There's now basically no possible way of negotiating an effective nuclear deal for at least a generation of time because of what has happened. We've now set a global precedent that every rogue state will study, that conventional deterrence doesn't work, only nukes do. Literally, like I said earlier, North Korea is using it live as propaganda. We have now Hezbollah and Israel at war, with Israel doing a land invasion and Hezbollah launching rockets into Israel all the time. And this is crazy. So, this is what's actually happened. This has been an absolute total bust. You know what I mean? And, look, they keep saying Trump, Hegseth, all these people, this won't be Iraq, this won't be Afghanistan, long, stuff like this. But what have we actually seen the last few weeks? We've seen the goalposts shifting by the day, victory undefined, costs hitting Americans. It's the same way. And the truth is, right, and this is just the reality, is that this only ends one of three ways, okay? This ends with the U.S. invading on the ground, like troop boots on the ground, right? The U.S. stepping back and leaving Israel to fight alone, or some sort of ceasefire that Iran can actually live with. Now, if I had to predict what it would be, I think it's option two. I don't know. I think boots on the ground would be so unpopular, and because it's the midterms, because prices are going up, it would be really stupid. And the second one would be more popular because Israel is unpopular in the U.S. right now, but wouldn't be popular amongst the GOP base because they love Israel, and obviously AIPAC would definitely not want that. And then the third one, which you would think would be the most likely one, will be trickier now because the new leadership is tough, right? They have specifically chosen leaders that don't get along with the U.S. So this vision that this would be some sort of Venezuela thing, which, by the way, that I don't know even what's going on with that, but that it would kind of not be a big fight, is basically done. And the Washington Institute, which, by the way, is not a liberal think tank, it's conservative/libertarian, said if the U.S. stopped today, it would be judged that the U.S. has lost this war. And that's our show, folks. Thank you so much for listening today. If you liked it, give it a review, share it with a friend, do all that stuff. Like I said off the top, though, you guys are awesome about doing that already. I am so happy with the way this is going. Obviously, but feel very honored and stuff like that. So I know I just talked about something depressing, but, it really, there's nothing you can do or I could do about this war, right? You want to hope that people can understand that the actions of politicians doesn't reflect the way civilians feel, or at least the majority of them do. And, all we can do is stay informed and vote during the midterms and vocalize how we feel, and that's what not just the show is doing, but what all of you do by, listening and talking to people and stuff like that. So I know sometimes it can feel like I say this a lot, but it is true. It seems overwhelming and depressing, but, just by engaging, you're making it more difficult for people to do things that take advantage of you because, people who are in charge, no matter what party, frankly, take advantage of ignorance and disinterest and apathy because you're easier to control and manipulate when you're not paying attention. But we are paying attention, and like I say a lot as a joke, but it's true. This show might be called the Lonely Liberal Podcast, but every day we feel a little less lonely, right? Because we're growing and growing and growing. So We'll be back on Sunday per usual, but until then, I'll talk to you later. Bye. Thank you.